I think somehow the DNA of the company is aligned to that kind of a model, right? You would hire a very different group if you were running a uh, developer tool kind of a business versus a SMB SaaS versus a large enterprise SaaS. We have salespeople on our teams who understand that it's going to take 2 years for them to break through a public sector account. And the point is the 2 years are not casual. You're not sitting for 2 years, right? They're literally 5 to 10 activities you're doing every week on each of these accounts still to bring it there. So the DNA is aligned to this. So I don't think we get jittery about the fact that these are 9 month sales cycles, 8 to 9 month sales cycles, etc. We know that we need to put in that effort and chip away at it. And we plan accordingly. So it's not like the unit economics of Vymo look any different from some of the best SaaS companies in the world. On some of our KPIs, we are actually in the top 1%. And we just have to chip away at this. There's just a different model and playbook you deploy across teams.
Hi everyone. Before we begin, I would like to share that this podcast is brought to you by Prime Venture Partners, an early stage VC fund led by Amit Somani, Shripati Acharya, and Sanjay Swami. Prime is often the first institutional investor in category defining tech startups in fintech, SaaS, healthcare, and education, such as MyGate, Quizzes, Planet Spark, Bolt, and Clip. To know more about Prime, visit primevp.in.
Hi, this is Siddharth Alwalia. Welcome to 100x Entrepreneur Podcast. Today I have with me someone who has built category in B2B software for financial institutions. Welcome Yamini Bhat, founder of Vymo. Yamini is a graduate of IIM Bangalore, then worked in Mckinsey for 6 years. She has a global experience in McKinsey. And when she wanted to build her own company, she wanted to, I listened to one of her previous talks back in 2018 that she said she wanted to sell to C-suite an enterprise software because that's where, her edge became in McKinsey, talking to C-suite, solving problems for them. Welcome, Yamini, to 100x Entrepreneur Podcast.
Thank you so much, Sid. Excited to be here.
Listeners, what we are going to discuss in the podcast today is the 0 to 10 mil ARR playbook. If you are a SaaS entrepreneur, any entrepreneur, and want to build, a playbook or learn how to go to 10 mil ARR, what are the different hurdles, bottlenecks that you can face during your journey, especially in this market when, in July 2022, we are fearing a recession, or recession is almost there. There could be none better than Yamini, who has built a giant software company, more than 10 million ARR, present across Asia, Pacific, and Japan and US, and now is looking to go triple the revenues and then the number of customers in the next 2 to 3 years. So Yamini, my first question to you is, before even you became an entrepreneur, uh, what were some of the thoughts, the backgrounds that you accumulated, the experiences that you accumulated that led you to entrepreneurship?
Yeah. So a lot of what we do at Vymo today predominantly got the learning and the thought process kind of came from my time at McKinsey. That's for me. Of course, I do have a co-founder, Venkat, who spent about the same amount of time, roughly a little more than 5 years at Google. And so a lot of how he thinks of product design and engineering comes from his background over there. Now, in terms of the problem statement we picked, the industries that we picked at McKinsey, I've done a lot of work on sales transformation with some of the largest enterprises, and I've done this work in Asia as well as US. Most of these were financial institutions, but there were also telco, healthcare kind of customers. And across the board, we had to, given McKinsey usually works with some of the largest companies in the world, uh, the problems there from a scale were massive, right? So large, massive distributed sales teams with 5, 10, 20, 200,000 sellers spread all out in the geography. As you keep growing the team to be able to achieve higher and higher growth goals, your productivity falls down very steeply. And the only tools we saw being used were on tighter and tighter controls and tighter management and reporting, right? Which again, any smart salesperson knows how to game, right? So there was not enough real information on what sellers were doing on the ground to be able to really factually say here is what will move the needle significantly and consistently. And then there were tools missing that could help you drive bottom up transformation, right? It was very top down, which requires a lot of energy and which has many points where it could break down one bad manager and you just can't get through to the team below, right? So Waymo was built with the intent to drive bottom-up sales transformation in large enterprises. We chose to go vertical in our play here because the way insurance agent sells insurance or your wealth manager advises you on your lifetime wealth management is very different from how a tech company sells software, right? And there is enough horizontal solutions out there which try to get to the 10-20% of the problem statement by just like CRMs provide a very good customer 360 and a web-based cloud-based database, but they are very very thin in terms of being able to provide a salesperson 360, a view of what sellers are doing, what's working, not working, and how to coach them, right? So the goal was to go vertical because the sales models are very unique in some of these verticals. The volume is huge in terms of global scale of how many salespeople or institutions there are. And the market is only going to grow hundreds of times bigger than what it is today, right? Because financial inclusion across the world, if you see the range of financial products that exist for a family, household, individual, or a business, it's we've not even scratched the surface of what needs to be positioned to be used by customers, target customers, right? So huge vertical, non-existent solution space, and we found the chance to. I mean, of course, as we grew, we realized that this was a massive category with more than 10 billion uh, addressable market that we have stumbled into and happen to be pretty uniquely positioned in. At that point in time, it just seemed like it was a very big problem without a solution that's out of the box out there. So those were the learnings from McKinsey or Google that we brought to the table.
And Yami, let's take a step back, right? Tell us about your family background, right? What did your father and mother do?
Yeah.
You choose BITS Pilani IIM Bangalore, McKinsey. How were these choices made?
Yeah. So mom is a homemaker. She comes from a family of 11 kids, and education was valued. They lived in a very rural part, and they used to travel quite a bit of distance to get to the schools and colleges, etc. She studied biology and wanted to be a marine biologist, but also post her marriage, once she had a kid, she have the first kid. I'm one of three. She was insanely focused on making us successful versus pursuing a career. That was her individual choice, and even today she gets a lot of joy just by like, she derives the most joy by spending time with us and doing things for us. All right, so that's about mom. Dad worked with NABARD. It was a public sector bank, then privatized. They help finance rural projects and livelihood projects. So NABARD led the spearheaded the whole transition as an organization towards, for example, modernization of Indian agriculture. Right, a lot of the watershed projects or soil erosion limited, like bore wells, canal irrigation projects, or even seed savings and crop rotations, multi-cropping, commercial cash cropping. All of these were propagated by NABARD, and that I have been able to watch his work from the sidelines. For I had the chance to watch his work from the sidelines for nearly like 15, 20 years, right, and could see how his work at grassroots all the way till he became like one of the top 10 leaders there. How decisions that they made really influenced livelihood at the grassroots level. So that's my background. But as parents, that's their background. But as parents, in general, we moved around a lot because dad worked with a bank, so we kept moving. So dealing with ambiguity, trying to find my place in new situations, etc., I think kind of became natural. The thing that uh, uh, helped me the most coming out of my childhood is the fact that at no point in my life did my parents ever make me feel like I was different from my brother, or women could do less, or that girls need to behave in a certain way. And that's very unique because now I look back and now I hear everything that is going around. And when I started getting into a professional career, there was so much noise on equality, discrimination, biases, etc. It was all of that was new when I was hearing about it, right? Because I never felt like anyone told me I was any different before that. And therefore, being cocooned from all of this so early on, I think has given me the confidence that actually took me through the last 10, 15, 20 years in terms of this journey, right? I was not worried about failing or just leaving a very high paying job and trying to do something that I wanted to do, etc. Like that confidence kind of took me to where I am today.
And what about the subsequent choices on BITS Pilani, on IIM Bangalore, and then why choosing Mckinsey?
Yeah, so BITS was I was the topper of my batch in board exams in 12th, and BITS was a very natural uh, journey from there. I didn't apply for any of the IITs at that point in time, uh, and yeah, BITS just seemed to be the natural place to go to. Dad always wanted me to aim high, but I was really not shooting to be the topper. It just turned out, and this was just a great place to go to. BITS itself was amazing in terms of the experience that we had over there. We were 200 kilometers away from a pizza joint, from anything, in fact. So there was a lot of, and BITS has a very, very unique model in how academics run there. Classes are not mandatory, attendance is not mandatory. You get to choose amongst six, seven different professors for every course. It's like a timetable that you have to create for yourself. You have to bid for professors, you have to bid for courses. So there is so much independence and trust that they place in you, that you also have to hone your judgment on what you want to do, right? You constantly want to have to think and question. You're not just being given a timetable or a coursework that you have to get through. You have to think about what you're going to pick, and you have to think about which prof, what time of the day, how, like if you want a window of 2 hours in the afternoon to take a nap, you have to optimize for that, and you can. The interesting thing was that you could optimize for a 3-day weekend. You could optimize for any of these, right? And so being given the choice actually, I believe, pushed a lot of people to be creative and thoughtful in what they chose to do and how they chose to spend their time. And therefore, I think so many entrepreneurs come out of BITS Pilani even today, right? I think that is stellar in how they build that out. From BITS, I interned at Baba Atomic, then I interned in France. I had a job offer there. I wanted to uh, come back to India, and my parents wanted me to do the usual thing, MS, and go to the US. All my friends and most of my batchmates left, and average salary coming out of BITS Pilani at that point was $6,000 per annum. And average FANG entry level job was $60,000 in the US. So naturally, all our gold medalists left. And it kind of felt stupid to stay back. But I've worked in the US, I've worked in London, I've worked in Paris. So I know that every place comes with its pros and cons. And it just felt like India has so much potential and opportunity, and some of our best brains are leaving, right? So who takes care of making this place better? So I think it's partly stupid, partly patriotism, partly just, I don't know, mindfulness that made me stay back. From there, I did my MBA at IIM Bangalore. And from there, I actually wanted to go to public services. Uh, with public services, the problem was like being, you have to finish your MBA at IIM Bangalore and then you have to give UPSC. And that's a commitment in itself. So that was the path I was taking. And along the way, the guidance was that, in general, from people who were in the IAS, some mentors that my dad connected me to, their guidance was to have a little bit of work experience and understand what the world is about before jumping into public services, to be more mindful of what I was trying to solve. So decided to look for, go through placements, etc. Worked with Goldman Sachs in London during my internship, had an offer, decided to come back, join McKinsey. McKinsey gives you opportunities to work with the government on public sector projects. That was great experience. Had the chance to second with some of the MPs, right? So a lot of learning from there. Ultimately, when I had the chance to start thinking seriously about UPSC and commit myself to it, my understanding of my own self was that, temperament wise, I was not the person who could wait for 20, 25 years to earn my right to have impact in a bureaucratic setting, right? I was not the temperament that would be successful over there. So spoke to a lot of mentors in the industry, and their whole point was to focus on things that I know really well and that can create a lot of value, right? And focus on building something in that space and earning credibility, creating wealth, right? Which can be repurposed to solve some of the biggest problems of our times, right? And that led me towards the path of entrepreneurship. Long story, Sid.
And when you decided, that you want to quit McKinsey and build something, how did building a CRM solution for large enterprises came into picture? Like, you would have various options, right? And being a consultant, you would study each market very objectively.
Yeah.
You would not be tied to a personal problem which most entrepreneurs tries to solve.
Yeah, definitely. So I did the whole framework two by two. What am I good at? What do I know really well? I've done 20 plus sales transformation projects, and what will people be willing to pay a lot of money for? Which is, people were paying millions of dollars to McKinsey to solve that problem, right? So somewhere I found a big enough bubble and went through the whole process. But I also work very intuitively, because in the whole MBTI framework, I'm a very very intuitive person, right? So it did seem like this was top of mind for CXOs, and uh, me in my 5 year career doing 21 sales transformation projects is marketing and sales is by itself a signal that this is such a big problem, right? And I'd worked with all the largest, some of the largest customers that McKinsey had. So definitely went through that process. Now, Vymo is not a CRM. We are a sales engagement platform that sits on top of CRMs, right? But therefore, it was the intersection of that. What do I know really well, and that people will pay significant value to solve. And is anyone else doing it? It didn't seem like. So it's a new category, and that fit bang into the DNA that Venkat and I have, because we are not good at being someone who tries to make something, an existing piece, make it smoother, cleaner, better, cheaper, etc. We were more excited by, hey, this has never been done before. Enterprise tech has very minimal adoption. Salespeople don't like to use any tools that will push them to report anything, and usually are one of the most skeptic lot, but they're also the largest part of someone's workforce. So engagement is crucial. So how do you now define usage adoption, and how do you drive that in such a uh, large user base, right? Such a large skeptical user base. That seemed like a meaty problem, and Venkat could put his Google mind to it. I could put my uh, McKinsey experience on creating value ROI for customers, etc., to it. And I believe we have found built out solutions which can deliver massive 20, 50 times ROI to customers within 3 to 6 months, right? Which is usually unheard of in large enterprise software.
And you mentioned, right, in our offline conversation before the podcast, that till Series A, right, you are a horizontal solution, sales solution which sits on top. Yeah.
So we discovered a lot of things in the journey. When Venkat and I started this company, SaaS in India was not like a very prominent thing. Today there are, I mean, there were two companies, it was Zoho and Freshwas. Right? Today there are 2,000, probably more, right? So we were just figuring this out as we went, and there was the whole segment we had to discover: mid-market versus large enterprise. We knew clearly that we were solving for enterprise, so SMB or developer tools were not what we were building. So the journey went from realizing that what we are building and the R&D involved to do this, we really need committed long-term high high growth large enterprises, right? We needed that volume. So discovering that this is a large enterprise play that we wanted to do, that took us nearly a year, after 4 or 5 launches, deployments, and experimentations. Then we ran with the horizontal play for 2 years nearly, all the way from 30, 40K deals to 100K deals, average contract value, right? And discovered a lot of things. Like, a lot of our customers at that point were Series A funded startups after we raised funding, right? And realized that many of them are just figuring out their process. So giving them a best in class process, they need their own journey to arrive at it, right? And many of them did not survive up to their own Series B or C. So there was a massive amount of churn, and there was a lot of wasted energy, right? So we wanted to look at organizations which were on the fastest growth path, and survival was not there. Again, so we went even up, more up market, started going to the number one, two, three banks, number one, two, three insurance companies, etc. And also we realized if we want to deliver sales outcomes, not just CRMs, for example, single view of a customer, right? It's a very easy to use database of customer information that you can plug and play into many things. It's a system of record, whereas Vimo is a system of engagement. And to be really relevant to an end user, you need to solve very uniquely for their journeys. And that's why when we realize we want to go deeper into certain journeys, and let's pick journeys and verticals which are massive for the world, right? And we learned that in large enterprise, BFSI as such is nearly 40% of Microsoft's or Gartner's earnings in a way, right? So it seemed like the largest vertical with the most IT budgets, very high moat because they're very risk averse. But if you're able to solve for those, the compliance barriers, then you become one of the few who has cracked that space, right? So invested heavily and decided to jump into that. All of this was almost you know, pre-A, we just decided to go up market. So Series A, post Series A, trying to go up market was what we were doing. Between A to B is when we took the call on going much more deeper into a vertical. Post B was the journey on going international. Right, so that's what our different life stages look like. Post B to C was about going international, breaking into 7 countries outside of India, etc. And now is when we are at the inflection point on a lot of these new markets, right? So now here on the journey is about execution for growth.
Dear listeners, before we dive further into the podcast, I would like to welcome Prashant Ganti, Head of Product Management at Zoho Payroll and Zoho Books. Prashant, what trends are you observing in the payroll and HR space?
Thanks, Siddharth. So, first off, right, with the pandemic induced remote working, so that's something that has caught on, and a hybrid working, a distributed workforce is here to stay. So, this affects the way a company's HR and payroll departments operate. And so, this introduces some complexities while a distributed workforce is good. It introduces payroll and HR complexities as well. Secondly, we are going to see more and more in the emerging area of compensation and payroll analytics. Next, what I'm seeing is more and more embedded BFSI related, embedded banking, payroll systems connecting with banks, more and more banks coming forward to integrate with payroll systems, and so do insurance providers, so that there's convergence between banking, insurance, fintech, and payroll that's going to happen. Also expect more AI and ML going to be incorporated into payroll as well. That's not something that comes to your mind at the very beginning when you think about payroll, but we are going to see payroll assistants that employees can interact with to understand their compensation details better. And finally, we are also going to see a lot more payroll being more deeply integrated with various other systems, not just from the transaction point of view, but to help with better decision making across the organizations.
Thank you, Prashant. Dear listeners, you will find more about Zoho Payroll in the show notes. Now, let's further continue with the podcast. And can you describe from 2013, like at what point you achieved certain milestones, like the first 1 million ARR, what year you achieved that, how many customers it took you, the 3 to 5 mil journey?
Yeah, the first person we hired was in 2014 or so. Until then, Venkat and I were like mostly on paper doing napkin
Yeah.
design work, right? From 2014, it took us about 2016, mid 2016 is when we raised our Series A. That's when we were getting close to like 700K or so in ARR. Then from there, we grew about more than 4x, 4.5x or so over the next 2.5 years, 2 years or so. And started focusing, like at that point in time, 70%, 80% of our revenue became BFSI, right, in that journey. And then we raised Series B. And since then, the international focus, and 2 years after that, 2.5, 3 years after that is when we have raised Series C.
So what revenue milestone or customer milestone were you at when you raised your Series C?
We were about, at C, we were about 45 customers and had already crossed the 10 mil threshold you were speaking about.
And you never raised a round before your Sequoia 5 million round?
No, we had not done seed or angel.
God, so it was your own and Venkat's money that went into.
We actually didn't put much of our money, really. Venkat and I never spent our money on this. I think coming from probably the middle class mindset, we just tried to get the customers to pay and started hiring once we had paying customers, which actually even today, we go to the market for fundraise once we have figured out, like, finished our experiments, and we really know that these are the three things we need to do for the next 2 years. Now let's push for it, right? Uh, and it's mostly for that execution that we raise. So you'll see that there is longer and longer gaps between our fundraise cycles. We actually take inspiration from a few companies like Viva only ever raised 4 million in its entire life before going to IPO, right? In fact, Salesforce only ever raised 65 million, uh, right, before going to IPO. So some of the best companies actually become cash efficient fairly quickly. For us, the reason we have raised three times has always been because large enterprise has massive sales cycle and therefore payback periods are longer. Going international, every country with a large sales cycle and again large enterprise kind of targeting, right? The go-to market is nearly 1.5 to 2 years for breaking into any new market. Because putting a team in place, ramping them is a 6 to 8 month process. Pipeline, marketing, that converting to pipeline converting to deals is another 9 to 12 month process. So you need that much of investment before you make dollars out of this. And therefore, that's where most of our fundraisers have gone into, right? Into that well of investment we need to make before these things take off. And we wanted to do multiple of these at the same time, multiple countries, etc. But otherwise, unit economics itself are pretty solid for Wimo. We have 153% net revenue retention. We have our sales efficiency is more than one, right? So our unit economics are pretty strong, and our burn therefore is relatively controlled.
And in your journey, right, what would you describe some of the toughest challenges have been till now?
Part of this, I think if we do this again, definitely we know a lot more about SaaS, including the fact that it's called SaaS now. At that point, we didn't know it was SaaS when we started. There is a lot more talent in the market today than when we started. Right, the amount of effort we had to put in to educate not just customers about this category, but the need for it, the pricing, battling the mindset on, you know, being a cheap product coming out of India versus actually being a more expensive product than some of the global options that they were evaluating, right? Many of these, and then people, we had to create talent initially. We had to take bets on generalists and really, like, they invested in us and we invested in them, and we grew together and figured out some the talent we have today, the leaders we have today are best in the SaaS world, some of the best, right? So that we had to kind of build from almost zero base. There was no one with large enterprise SaaS experience who had sold into BFSI, into a vertical globally, right? So those were some of the bigger challenges we had to chip away at. But I don't think there were days or nights when we were like, oh my God, this is crumbling. What do we do? We didn't have to go through that.
And did the longer sales cycle deter you?
I think somehow the DNA of the company is aligned to that kind of a model, right? You would hire a very different group if you were running a uh, developer tool kind of a business versus a SMB SaaS versus a large enterprise SaaS. We have salespeople on our teams who understand that it's going to take 2 years for them to break through a public sector account. And the point is the 2 years are not casual. You're not sitting for 2 years, right? Like, they're literally 5 to 10 activities you're doing every week on each of these accounts still to bring it there. So the DNA is aligned to this. So I don't think we get jittery about the fact that these are 9 month sales cycles, 8 to 9 month sales cycles, etc. We know that we need to put in that effort and chip away at it. And we plan accordingly. So it's not like the unit economics of Wimo look any different from some of the best SaaS companies in the world. On some of our KPIs, we are actually in the top 1%. Um, and we just have to chip away at this. There's just a different model and playbook you deploy across teams.
And I believe your average contract value would be somewhere between 100,000 to $300,000 today.
Yeah, it's actually, no, it's actually more than that. It's about, I think, somewhere 350 to $400,000.
So initially, for your first 10 BFSI customers, right? How did you manage to convince that such a high-paying software, which is sitting on top of your CRM?
Yeah. So it was not easy. Many of them spent much lesser on the CRM itself as a whole. But one of the things that made us choose BFSI is that their sales cycles are small. They sell to an insurance policy or a wealth management product is sold within 2 to 3 weeks, right? So these enterprises, when they even have to spend a dollar, forget about what they're spending on us, on top of technology which is already recognized like a CRM, they understand the pain. They understand that there's a huge gap. They wouldn't believe that a startup will solve this, where the biggest cloud SaaS company in the world, not AWS, right? Like Salesforce has not already solved it, right? So it's tough for them to believe that we can do it, and therefore, usually, initially, to build our credibility in this category, we had to do pilots. Right? We always were clear that we would only do paid pilots so that customers are committed to success too. And we needed to make sure that within a 4 to 8 week period in a POC, we are able to show outcomes, actual sales increase. Otherwise, on what basis would we ask them to pay us $2 when they're spending $1 on the CR, right? And we built the product out in a way that we were able to do that, and they saw results that they've never seen before. They did not that they saw results that they did not even think they could, expect, just from how they set targets to their team. Right, these were like 3x better than targets they were originally setting for their team. So that's what drove conviction. Our first BFSI customer, in fact, when post the pilot, after almost a 4x increase in lead conversions after 2-3 weeks, when he asked for approval for Vymo, he was told to deploy the CRM and do whatever he could with the CRM and not buy something on top. He actually gave Vymo's purchase order and his resignation letter to his boss and said, sign one of the two. Right? You can't give me a target and not give me the tools I need. And that was very scary even for us, because someone put their career online for us. And it recently happened for our one of our first customers in the US also, right, where they asked for Vymo or said that they would resign, right? So uh, that's what told us that we were doing something really right, and then we stuck with that, right? But we had to prove to the customer, and therefore adoption and fast ROI have been, and fast launches have been part of our DNA and how we built out.
Yami, you built Waymo in a very counterintuitive way, whereas most SaaS entrepreneurs, what they try to do is start selling in US first and then expand into other geographies. Whereas what you do is build a SaaS behemoth in India, then went to APJ, and now you have finally, have early signs of success in US. Why was that?
So, when you are it depends on your segment play, right? When you are a SMB, when you're targeting SMB, you're usually marketing yourself through Google Ads, and when you're mid market, you're marketing yourself through content, and therefore your reach is pretty global. It can be pretty global at a marginal cost difference to you, right? For a large enterprise, your play is very account led. You have 1,000 target accounts, or 10 or 5,000, or whichever way, right? And then those are split by geography, and therefore, and you need local presence. You need local presence of not just sales, but also pre-sales and potentially customer success, business development, etc., to be able to break through these large accounts. Uh, right? These are Fortune 500, 1,000 companies, and 1,000, probably a million other companies are targeting them, right? So you need to get onto their radar. It's a very focused play and requires local presence. Right now, if you see our journey, very natural. Our goal was to build the product company out of here. That is something that Venkat and I really wanted to do, to build a company that could create opportunities that our gold medalists could stay back for in India, right? So that's something that we are extremely proud of, and that's how the product and engineering got built out of India. Now, in the process of experimenting and finding our feet, we ended up, uh, onboarding two of the top three banks in India, like two, three of the top five, six insurers in India, etc. Right? So we found our product market fit very, very quickly. And if you look at the growth that is happening in Asia at this point in time, right? Typically, what do you expect from a SaaS company at that stage? You expect a 4x growth year on year, then you expect 3x, then you expect 2x, 2x. And all of that was happening for us right off the bat here, right? Which was very economical also, in a way that we were getting to a 1 million scale without even having to step out of one city, in a way. And that is a large enterprise SaaS play, right? And even if you look at today, we have more than $10 million in business coming just out of like Asia. And that is expected to double this year again, and potentially double even next year. Uh, right. So if you look at this, you can see that the growth potential that is happening over here would make any SaaS company or SaaS investor want to have the same play, right? Of course, the largest TAM for us will probably be in the US. US is usually 60% of the CRM market, and let's assume that that's how even the new age technology will play out. Uh, Asia is growing fast. We will hit all our SaaS growth KPIs just off the bat in Asia, but US success will give us the shot at being a $1 billion company in revenue one day, right? And that's why that market is important. And that's why our entry into that market and huge focus at this point in time. But even outside of that, the fact that Asia will continue to double in its growth year on year is such a sweet muscle to have. And the unit economics are fantastic, even here. This is not something that, this is not something that uh, many folks would have believed even 5 years ago. In fact, it was one of the biggest skepticism we received from investors, right? Just the fact that, hey, you're starting in Asia, will you be able to sell in the US one day? Our first US customer ended up being Berkshire Hathaway. In Asia, we have 74% daily active usage. In US, we ended up having 85% daily active usage, right? So our numbers only became better over there. But that skepticism has been very there are reasons for that because Asia is expected to be a much lower price point market. It's expected to be a much smaller TAM, but I do think the world is changing in terms of where high growth will come from, and Asia is changing in terms of what they'll be willing to pay for value.
Yamini, if you have to share your some parts of your playbook, right? How to create a 10 mil ARR SaaS company for those SaaS entrepreneurs sitting in India, selling to India and then globally, enterprise SaaS, large ACVs, how to do it? What would your 5 to 10 pointers on that?
Yeah, unless you're going for very very large enterprise customers, like for example, Amagi is another peer company that sells into streaming, large streaming companies, right? For them, Hotstar, for example, would be a massive account. Similarly, so unless you're selling to very large enterprise SaaS, I'm not sure starting with India and trying to go global should be the playbook. You can just start global, right? If you're doing SMB, just start global. How does it matter where the SMB is sitting? And make sure that you're global right from day zero, right? The guidance, my playbook would never be to go to one geography first. Every product is unique. Its target market and ICP is unique. I have seen SaaS companies that whose ICP is public sector utilities, right? And there is no way you can sell a consistent product to public sector utilities in Asia at this point in time. But in the US, you'll have 3,000 such companies that you can sell into, right? So it depends on what you're building and who you're targeting and where your customer is sitting, right? We sell to the largest banks and insurers in the world, and AXA operates in what 60 plus countries, right? So it's a different story and it's unique to us. Right, just in terms of the 0 to 10 or any playbook, right? Initially, your story is always about product market fit, right? Which segment, what ticket size, whether it's a vertical, whether it's a horizontal, who you're selling into. Just trying to figure out that one, you can sell at the price that will be win-win for both of you. Second, that you can do it a 10 20 times, right? And after that, you're looking for repeatable growth, right? My biggest playbook for growth has been it invest a lot in the kind of people you hire in your company. I spend probably 100 hours finding the right person and 10 hours managing them later within a year. Right. So over invest in the kind of talent you bring. Uh, right. And that's a huge, that's what gives you massive leverage and being able to shoot for bigger and bigger goals. That's definitely one big learning for me. Right. We have become very talent led in how we operate at this point in time, top talent led, right? Uh, Second thing would be uh, if you're if you're in the large enterprise play, your growth kind of depends on how quickly you get to the bigger and bigger markets. So if you can start in the US on day zero, go ahead and do that. Each market in a large enterprise play takes you almost 18 to 24 months to break in and get to stable growth on. So budget for that, plan for that, and have those expectations both internally as well as to your investors, right? So that no one is disappointed and no one is looking for quarter results within the first quarter. That doesn't happen in the large enterprise play, right? So that's the second one. Budget for it and stick with it, right? Stick through with it. Second, what's been truly, if you're working in a new category, which has been our journey, it's very very important that you are constantly focusing on your customer way more than you're focusing on what is competition, because there are a lot of adjacent categories which might be able to try to solve what you're trying to solve and position a product to the customer at one tenth the cost because it's an adjacent category for them, right? It's a sweet add-on for them, and they don't even give the best products out there, right? But they might have other capabilities which are not things that you want to build. So don't go trying to replicate what someone else has. Pay less attention to competition, and but pay like 100,000 times more attention to your end user and customer. Right? That's extreme, and the entire DNA of your company has to be aligned to listening to the customer, and trying to understand what the customer's problem is and finding the solution. Never let the customer write your product roadmap. Let the customer explain the needs, and you find out what is the right way to solve it. Right? So those would be the three things that have been very, very big learnings for us through our journey. And again, our journey is unique, right? It's a new category. It's very large enterprises, and it's a vertical play. So things will look different if you are doing a global SMB play. But for anyone doing plays similar to us, that would be my guidance.
Thank you so much, Yamini. I know we are constrained by time and would like to dive deeper into each of the areas that you mentioned during the podcast on how you built it, right? Especially the team part, how you invest like 100 hours before you hire a person and 10 hours then managing them. But thank you so much for sharing, your experience, your playbooks, your learnings in life. Really appreciate that. Thanks for being on the 100x Entrepreneur podcast.
Thank you so much, Sid. My pleasure being here. Thank you.